Hey folks, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. We're back for another video and another podcast here of Chris. I'm Chris Peterson of HuskerBigRed.com, and joining me here as always is Danny Gillette. We're here, folks, to talk about some Nebraska recruiting and everything that's kind of going on with the Cornhuskers. Obviously, it's not been a great week this week with Dylan Raiola announcing his commitment to Georgia on Monday. So I know that people were probably sick of the Dylan Raiola talk, but we wanted to, kind of give it the final post-mortem on what this all meant for Nebraska. And, did Nebraska make the right decisions in this recruitment? Did they have any regrets? Some of those things. What's the next step at quarterback? It was kind of interesting. Dylan, announced his commitment a little bit after our show on Monday. So it seemed like we were a little behind the eight ball, but it's been a few days now. Danny, have you recovered from the Dylan Raiola commitment yet?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I am eating a celebratory cake and blowing up my balloons because all of this and quite frankly, all this shit is finally over. All the stuff that Hayes Fawcett lives for, all the stuff that we've been quite frankly getting clicks off of and all these articles, it's finally over. He's at Georgia. I am so tired of talking about him for now. I'm so tired of all this Dylan Raiola recruitment stuff. I had a feeling he wasn't going to come here. I do think Georgia's a little bit interesting considering their quarterback room is loaded. So I'm wondering uh, if that will leave an odd man out, so to speak, and one will end up in the transfer portal. But I mean, this came as no surprise to me. I am disappointed, but we haven't seen any results on the field yet from the Matt Rule era, of course, because no games have been played. But I can't fault them for choosing Georgia at all.
Yeah, I can't fault Dylan Raiola for choosing Georgia, and it's actually one of the better, probably the best commitment the Bulldogs have got since Justin Fields, really. And in terms of the quarterback position, they've got some other good ones, but Dylan Raiola is a different level. They missed on Arch Manning last year, and so this I think kind of makes up for that. They have another four-star quarterback, Puglisi, I believe is his name, Ryan Puglisi. He said he's still. So I was kind of wondering to see if he would reopen things. Doesn't look like he will, but
Carson Beck too, right?
which is well. Carson Beck's their starter this year.
So was it
Pug,
Carson Beck, Pugsley, Raiola, and then
yeah, and then they've got Brock Vandegrift
yeah.
and Gunnar Stockton is another. So basically, all those guys have been ranked in the top 150 overall. Beck, Stockton, and Vandegrift are kind of competing for the job right now. But one of those guys will probably transfer, before next year. That's probably why they're going to bring on both of these two guys. But it'll be interesting. It's looking back on it, it seems so predictable to me that it's almost like I feel like that Matt Rule in Nebraska did make a mistake by putting all their eggs in Dylan Raiola's basket. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have recruited them, but I don't know that they should have ignored other quarterbacks, for Dylan Raiola. Like they missed a really good quarterback in Daniel Kalen because they basically ignored him because they were trying to put all their eggs in the Dylan Raiola basket, and it just seems like, and maybe they did feel at that time that they could get him, but it just seems to me like they should have, been a little more conservative in their approach. And if they had, maybe they would, have a solid quarterback in the class right now instead of scrambling, which is what they are doing right now. They are scrambling. There's no question about it.
I would rather them go after a Dylan Raiola than completely ignore him like they did Max Duggan or Zane Flores. So I understand that part of it, but you're right. At the same time, I think now they have to kind of scramble for a 2024 quarterback. And, I said this to you off air, but if transfer quarterbacks are the way to go to get wins and make the program more appealing to quarterbacks, if winning and building a solid program via transfer portal quarterbacks gets it done, I'm all for it. I understand developing quarterbacks. I understand, wanting to get development in the room because, quite frankly, we haven't had it in 5 years. But I mean, at this point, I just want wins to help us improve in recruiting and, kind of make recruits comfortable with committing to Nebraska. Nobody knows what this program is going to do right now. And, uh, bringing in experienced transfers for now to help kind of set the foundation for a winning program that players want to commit to, I think is the way to go.
I agree with that in some ways, but I think it's a little more difficult than just get a transfer quarterback.
Right.
Okay, so Jeff Sims is coming back, and he says he's coming back next year. So what transfer portal quarterback do you think is going to come to Nebraska that's worth anything? Nobody, because Jeff Sims is already starting. They're not going to come here to Nebraska to sit on the bench for a year. You know what I mean? You're not going to get a quality guy that's going to do that. I mean, maybe a cast off from somewhere, but you're still taking a chance on somebody that wasn't good enough somewhere else. I mean, I get it, but it's, to me, unless you have a starting job open, like, you're not going to get the top level transfers because they're just not going to come here and sit for a year. So that's why you have to get a quarterback in 20. You just have to. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You have to sign a quarterback in this class. You have to sign a quarterback in every single class. And if you don't get one, and like Georgia didn't get one last year, they got two this year. And that's why I question the rule strategy, because with Dylan Raiola, because Georgia had a quarterback in their room the entire time, a top 100 quarterback, and they're committed for this 2024 class the entire time they recruited Dylan Raiola. So I don't see why Nebraska couldn't have gone after Daniel Kaelin, got his commitment, and then still recruited Dylan Raiola at the same time. I mean, the situation, to me, it's not any different. It's not like having that second quarterback, prevented, Georgia from recruiting him. Now, maybe it would have been harder to keep the commitment of Kaelin, if Raiola eventually committed, but that was a kind of a long shot anyway. So to me, they should have taken the kid that was in the state that really did want to come here. I mean, if they would have pushed for Daniel Kaelin, he'd be committed right now. That's 100% my opinion. And, so to me, I do think that they, in their strategy and how they approach this recruitment, I do think that they made some missteps. And, Matt Rule basically said that he made a misstep with, Teddy Rizak. And so, they kind of, I'm not saying you're not going to bat 1,000, you're going to make mistakes, but, they're, with the way this whole thing kind of, shaked out. I mean, this is now, we talked about Zane Flores, never got an offer, and Daniel Kaelin, I mean, his scouting report comparison is Kirk Cousins from 24/7 Sports. So I mean, this is the second year in a row you've got a top 500 overall quarterback in the state of Nebraska, and you're not going to get him. And there's just no excuse for that to me.
And I'm not saying necessarily bring in a transfer portal quarterback all the time, but I mean, look at who we have leading the program right now, a transfer portal quarterback. I think, transfer portal quarterbacks like Sims can be used to help us make the program more desirable. And I don't think it's a sustainable strategy at all, but I do think it's the way to kind of, you know, get the program back on solid footing. So we'll see what Sims does this year, and then, you know, probably next year, and then beyond that, I think Nebraska really needs to start looking hard at what quarterbacks are out there. I know Stone Saunders came to visit on Monday, but he is a highly valued quarterback. He's a rising quarterback with a very solid offer sheet. Threw for over 6,000 yards in 2 years of recorded statistics, 100 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. So he will have plenty of options on where he wants to go for his collegiate career.
Yeah, he's definitely a target. I actually don't know that he visited. I think he just posted a picture with Matt Rule. I don't think he actually visited campus this week. I haven't seen any reports of him actually taking a visit to campus, so I'm not sure about that one. But I know he did post that picture with Matt Rule. But I think that might have just been an old picture that he decided to repost the day that, like, Dylan Raiola decommitted. So I don't know. I think that's
So
an
then I just wrote
interesting
a whole
sign.
article about him visiting on Monday, and he probably didn't even visit on Monday. But such is life, I guess. Sorry, everybody.
I'm not 100% sure, but I haven't seen, like, it's not reported on his On3 profile or anything. And Brian Munson from Husker Online, he talked about him in the this morning's post, and he just said that he posted a picture with Matt Rule. He didn't say that, so I think he would have said if he was on campus. So it is kind of confusing though, because you can't really tell. But I was gonna try to ask Saunders about it, but in a DM. But yeah, at any rate, he is probably the top guy in the 2025 class, and I do think that the transfer portal can be useful. I'm just saying I don't think it's going to be. It's if you have an open starting job, I just think it's a lot easier. Like, if Jeff Sims isn't going to be here for the 2024 season, then yeah, Nebraska is going to be a top destination for transfer portal quarterbacks. But if you do have Jeff Sims already entrenched as a starter, then I just don't think it's just going to be hard to get guys that are going to be starting caliber players, because they all want to go somewhere where they can start. You know what I mean? And if Jeff Sims already had like a good season at Nebraska, they know they're really not going to come in and compete with him for the job. So you have to find a guy in the transfer portal who's willing to be your number two. And I mean, you might be able to find a guy like maybe that joined a program, in the 2023 class and then is going to leave, that's an option in the transfer portal. But in terms of having a guy that you're going to get as a transfer and like sit for a year behind Jeff Sims and then start, I just don't know that there's that many players out there that are going to be you're going to be able to get for that particular role that are actually going to be like a starting caliber player. So that's why I just think you need to develop these younger guys. And then because basically, look, almost every offseason you're going to have guys leaving your quarterback room. That's just people have to get used to it. It's going to be like this every single offseason. You're going to have 2-3 guys leaving your quarterback room. So you got to bring in one or two every single year. And sometimes that is going to be from the portal and depth guys from the portal. But I just think the best way to go about it is to try to find a starting caliber high school kid every single year. And then that just protects you going forward when eventually those guys leave.
Now, I do find it interesting that Kamari McClellan is going to be on campus the first weekend in June. I know the staff, some think that he may be a last resort type of option. Others see him more as a project player, but um, you know, he has a strong arm. He has the ability to, make accurate passes. He is sort of a mobile type of quarterback. So I wonder if that's an option. Um, you know, Dante Reno we've talked about, and there could be the possibility of flipping Daniel Kalen. Who knows? I mean, just 3 months ago, it looked like Dylan Raiola was trending towards Nebraska, and now he's at Georgia. So you never know in terms of this, the recruiting process and how things are going to play out. But I do think there are options for Nebraska football. They just need to act quickly before those options disappear.
Yeah, and that's the thing is you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, say for instance, I don't know that much about Missouri football. I know they've kind of been, a solid program, but say they go like 3-9 this year and the coach gets fired. Okay, well Daniel Kalen's back on the board then. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things that can change between now and the fall. I mean, like there's a kid from Indiana, Tyler Cherry, is a 4-star quarterback that I think Nebraska needs to get in an offer like right away. I honestly don't know what they're doing. I mean, unless they just want Kamari McClellan and that's like they're waiting for him, which they haven't offered yet, but they're just sitting around not offering any quarterbacks. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But at any rate, this kid, that's the thing. This Tyler Cherry kid is a 4-star quarterback, and he's trending to Duke. I mean, Indiana's kind of been in the mix. Penn State's been in the mix. Michigan State, and I just don't understand why Nebraska wouldn't try to, get in the mix with an offer. But it's the same thing. Maybe by the end of the season, he decides to, reopen his commitment. Lots of things can happen between now and signing day, but
Yep.
it does seem like Kamari McClellan with that previous relationship is kind of the guy that they're focused on. He was at recently an Elite 11 camp and did get some impressive notes. He does have a strong arm, and he's a guy that if you develop him right, he could turn into a starter. He's not somebody who's going to come in and play,
Mm.
as a freshman. He's probably not somebody that you even want to be your number 2 as a freshman, honestly. But if you could, but say, Jeff Sims is here through the 2024 season, maybe this guy, after sitting on the bench for a year, could be ready as a sophomore or as a junior or something. So it's just adding more depth. It's not necessarily that, you're going to go get, a guy that's going to start as a freshman right away, like a Dylan Raiola or whatever, which he may not even do. But you do need to, I think, have those guys it's just like an NFL team trying to, draft a quarterback all the time, even if you have one. You know what I mean? It's just, I do like the transfer portal, and I think it is a viable situation. I think Matt Rhule is going to be able to get good players out of there, but I just think long term you need to at some point have the back end developed with a high school quarterback too.
I agree, and I think if you surrounded your quarterback, and we've said this before, if you surround your quarterback with good playmakers and a good offensive line, then star rankings don't really matter. I mean, you look at the success of Alabama quarterbacks and how, you know, recently they've had success. Mac Jones, Tua, Jalen Hurts, but in previous seasons the knock on Alabama quarterbacks was that they always kind of stunk once they left Alabama. And you know why? Well, at Alabama, they had, an all NFL offensive line, crazy good wide receivers, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, and so it just goes to show that if you surround a quarterback with good playmakers, they can get things done. And as long as, this coaching staff keeps addressing the offensive line and, keeps adding to the wide receiver position, then I'm not as worried about the quarterback we get in terms of skills so much as just making sure that he's on the right track in terms of development and continuing to develop him throughout the course of his career because we've gotten, in theory, good quarterbacks, in the past, couple seasons. We just haven't developed them properly.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I do believe that the quarterback position really has basically since Eric Crouch left, it's stunk quite a bit for Nebraska. There's been a few decent starters, Taylor Martinez, I mean, Zach Taylor had a couple of good years, Joe Gans, but there's been some solid players, but Nebraska has not had a star quarterback since Eric Crouch. And I don't think that that's a debatable. Taylor Martinez was good. He wasn't a superstar. He didn't take this team to new heights. So they're not going to win big until you find, a transcendent type of quarterback. That's just what I believe. And it helps to have guys around you. That doesn't necessarily mean that the guy has to be transcendent at the NFL level, but, you need to have somebody at the college level that, at least can play at an all Big Ten type level, second or third team or whatever. That doesn't mean even putting up, Cade McNamara was, third team all Big Ten 2 years ago. And he threw like 18 touchdown passes. So, you don't have to have like a superstar, but you need to have somebody that's dynamic that, is going to make really good plays. And to be honest, that's been the thing that Nebraska's been missing more than any other position. I think over the last 20 years, they just have not been able to, since they made the transition to the Bill Callahan West Coast system or whatever, they have not been able to recruit the quarterback position worth a damn, essentially.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of thinking out loud. Counterpoint to that, what about Northwestern? Obviously, last year they were not very good, and we were their only win, which is crazy to think about. But they haven't had a good quarterback, so to speak, and yet they've won division titles and things like that. So you know is it possible to kind of skate by with a good running game and a good offensive line? Because those are two things that they've managed to have. Isaiah Bowser was one of the most consistent running backs for them in their history.
Northwestern, yeah, they got there during the COVID year. To Ohio State, they still lost the championship game, and their quarterback actually was still pretty good that year. Thorzian or whatever. He had a really good. He was kind of like Aiden O'Connell this year, not an NFL quarterback, but he was a really good college quarterback. Cade McNamara with Michigan's probably the best example, but they had an elite defense and they had an elite run. They had Aiden Hutchinson, one of the best defenses in the country. They had the best offensive line in the country. And Cade McNamara still played well, and they still had JJ McCarthy coming off the bench and making, even when they beat Ohio State, JJ McCarthy made a 40-yard throw that nobody else, that, maybe CJ Stroud can't even make. There was one throw in that game that Cade McNamara couldn't make. And it was a perfect throw from JJ McCarthy, which led to a touchdown. But they also have, Blake Corum. If you have superstar running backs in an offensive line, that, you could do that too. But that's the other thing with Nebraska. Since Amir Abdullah, we have not had a big time running back either. So it's just been the skill position talent at Nebraska, which used to be, the quarterback and the running back kind of guys, because they've never really had, big time talent at receiver, but it just has not been good. Really, Amir Abdullah, if I'm blanking on anybody else's name, but it's just the past few years, have not been great in terms of the running backs.
Zigbo, maybe.
Yeah, he had one decent season, that's the thing. Scott Frost never had, as bad as he was at finding quarterbacks, he was just as bad at finding running backs too.
He wasn't that bad at finding the bar, but anyway, no, he was pretty bad. He was pretty bad at finding talent, but
Or
I
just not
think,
knowing how to use it, like Wandale Robinson,
well, yeah,
Kentucky makes him an NFL slot receiver, and we'll try to make him a little gadget dumbass player, and then he'll leave because he's sick of being a running back.
and
Just
honestly,
stupid.
him and Verduzco destroyed Adrian Martinez, and
Yeah.
I think, but yeah, no, I think hopefully Rule will get the most out of the players he brings in.
But
I
I do think Jeff Sims has a chance to be a really good quarterback this year, just to
do
throw that
too.
out there.
No, I do too. I definitely do. I just worry about the depth, behind him. Like if Sims
Yeah,
goes down because,
yeah, we're screwed.
and
If Sims goes down, we're screwed. That's
until
just the bottom line.
until they win Big Ten Offensive Line of the Year in December, I'm not, holding my breath for this unit. But it is kind of interesting that and fans were mentioning this, and normally I don't pay attention too much, but I did have to think. Fans were like, "Oh, now that Dylan's no longer at Nebraska, what's going to happen with Donovan?" I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if Donovan has another bad year, he's absolutely gone. I mean, that experiment of using your uncle to uh try to get his nephew, that failed miserably. And I do think there are probably better coaches out there that we could have gotten looking back on it now. But if Donovan has another bad year, I see, no reason for him to stay, and we could probably get a more proven offensive line coach. Because the thing about it too is he came over from the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears are one of the worst offensive lines in football over the past 3 seasons. So take that for what you will.
Yeah, it's true. You never really know. I mean, it's always hard with offensive line coaches because I remember Michigan had one of the best offensive line coaches, Ed Warner, and they fired him for Sharon Moore, who played tight end at Oklahoma, and everybody was like, "Oh, I don't know about how this is going to work out." And then, boom, they won the next two, Joe Moore awards. So I'm not saying that that's going to happen here at all, but maybe Donovan Raiola just I would just want to see what he can do under a head coach that's not Scott Frost, because I think that everything that Scott Frost touches is just going to automatically go to
Yeah.
shit. Because I just think he's the worst head coach Nebraska has ever had and probably will ever have. And I don't think that that's debatable. He just absolutely ruined this program. And at any rate, I would like to see what Dylan Raiola could do with a competent head
Donovan,
coach.
not Dylan.
Yeah, sorry, Donovan. Yeah, I want Dylan coaching the offensive line, but Donovan Raiola, I'll be interested to see how he works like with a functioning coaching staff and not that just absolute garbage that was happening under Scott Frost.
And honestly, he has 5 commitments during his time at Nebraska. 2 or 3 of his 5 commitments have come from in-state, and um, 1, Gibson Pyle, has come from Texas. So it's not like he's a top-notch recruiter either. I mean, the highest recruit he has right now, I'm looking at his top all-time commits list, is Gunnar Gatula, who has an 87.9 rating on 24/7 Sports, and then it's Gibson, and then it's Brock Knudsen, and then it's Sam Sledge, and then it's Jason Majicic, I believe his name was, the defensive lineman who could also play offensive line. My point here is he's not the he's not a known recruiter. He's not the best recruiter. I'm trying to say this without bashing any of the kids, of course, but you can replace that recruiting production with another coach as well too. So he doesn't really bring that to the table either. And I understand all coaches don't have to be great recruiters, but for a position with which we've quite frankly sucked, maybe we need a little bit better of a recruiter at the position as well.
Yeah, it's hard for me to say because I just don't know at the same time. Like, I don't know that Nebraska's ever going to get, like they're just not going to recruit like other places. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I think Nebraska does need a coach that can really develop guys. I'm not as much as worried about the recruiting part of it, but I want a guy that can take, a 3-star kid that's like 6'6", 305 and develop him into an NFL left tackle. You know what I mean? Like that's what I feel like Nebraska needs. And then I think once you start doing that and you develop players, then that kind of becomes a recruiting tool, right? And Michigan's kind
Yeah.
of been able to use that. So more than the recruiting, I think, especially with offensive line, because the development part of it is so key. I'm not as worried about finding a dynamic recruiter, but I do know what you're saying about Raiola in that the sense he's not like. It would be one thing if he wasn't a great tactician, if he was landing like top 100 offensive linemen, but at the same time, he's going to have to show this year that that this group makes progress. I mean, I think Matt Rule has shown in the past, if things aren't working, he's going to make a change because he knows more. He knows as well as anybody. Like Matt Rule just got fired. I mean, let's not forget about that. Matt Rule, that is fresh in his mind, and like he knows that. I mean, he understands. There's that grace period, but say if he has 2 losing seasons to start his Nebraska career, he will be that seat will be hot as
Mm-hmm.
shit by the 3rd season. He knows that.
Mm-hmm.
He understands that, and so I don't think that he's going to be if they have a losing season this year. I think that changes will be made. I'm sure Donovan Raiola would be among them.
Yeah, I mean, and again, you don't need a dynamic recruiter when you have an offensive line focused type of staff. But, it would be nice as a recruit to, feel confident in your offensive line coach. And Nebraska just hasn't shown the results, to be confident, in my opinion, with the positional unit. And I do think you're right. If things go south year one, I would honestly expect changes to be made because you look at what TCU did with Sonny Dykes, right? I mean, they turned it around quickly. And although that's not the norm for all the programs, it does kind of, put a recency bug in people's ear. Hey, you know what? TCU did this in 1 year. We got to make some progress here, especially after Nebraska has been losing for so long.
Yeah.
So long.
The grace period's not going to last long. It's Matt Rule gets 1 year grace period. If he doesn't have a winning season this year, then people are already going to be talking about how he's not the right coach. I guarantee it. That's going to be the talk all off season. If he can't get this team to 6-6 or 7-5 or whatever, and you know what, that'll be kind of legitimate because this team's good enough to make a bowl game. It was good enough last year to make a bowl. It was good enough every single year that Scott Frost was the head coach to make a bowl game. It's good enough this year, and if they don't make it, then he's going to be the heat's going to be ticking up. I mean, even going into next year, I'm not saying like Trev Alberts would obviously make any moves
Yeah.
after that, but the fan base, if there's another losing season, the fan base is like they'll put up with it a little more. They'll give them a little more leeway. But like it's not going to be like cherries and roses and sunshine
Yep.
next offseason if they go like 4-8 again. It just won't be.
Well, it makes me think of Mario Cristobal in Miami. Yes, he's only had 1 year to, get things turned around, but fans are already not happy with what they see. And Cristobal needs to have a good year because there was such high expectations for him
Yep.
and the Hurricanes and the
And
blowout
he's
loss.
signing like top 5 classes.
He is. And the blowout loss against FSU last November certainly sticks with Hurricanes fans as well. So, I mean, with this transfer portal era and the ability to recruit and all this NIL and things like that, the grace period of the old days where, oh, he's rebuilding a program, he needs to take his time. There is no time, especially for
No.
places like Nebraska and Miami that love their football and are desperate to win. There is no time, and I just want a winning season, man. That's all I want. I don't even care if it's like 6-6 in a bowl game. I'd be happy with that. I just want to be happy when I do these shows. I'm happy
Yeah.
right now because the season hasn't started yet, but but I just want to be happy and have a product on the field that I'm proud of and not embarrassed by.
Not pulling my hair out every other week. I definitely would like to beat the crap out of Colorado. That would be fun,
That would
but
be awesome, but
I would love to see that.
that's gonna be a very interesting game. I might want to stream that one because
Yeah,
you
that'll
know
be interesting.
fans are gonna be all excited for that one, and I would say Nebraska fans will be excited to be at the game, but Colorado's done a nice job of trying to make sure that Nebraska fans don't get tickets for that one. So that's
Well,
interesting, but
I mean, I think they'll have some
they'll
success. There's gonna
they'll
be
find their way.
there'll be a sea of red there. It may not be as big as like it was when they went there like the last time, with Adrian Martinez when they blew that game,
Oh, don't
um,
remind me of that.
it's there'll be a sea of red there, and yeah, it's gonna be fun. I am really excited about Jeff Sims, like you. I'm worried about the health aspect of it, but I do think the offensive line is going to be better, and I think the defense is going to be really good. I mean,
Yeah, I
I
do too.
I think that's going to be the calling card of this team. The way I look at this team is I think the defense is going to be a huge step up, and I think it's just having like it's going to be like the back end of last year when Bill Bush was running the show, but even better. I think Tony White is even better than Bill Bush. As much as I love Bill Bush, but he just has I think that it factor. He knows how to call. I mean, even just in the spring game, just limited stuff there, the way he was mixing up his calls. And I just see a lot more success like on third downs. Third down was plagued this program. We would get teams in like
Yeah.
third. I swear to God, they'd be like 3rd and 11 conversion percentage was like 80%, it seemed like at
Yeah.
times. So I really think that, and that's the thing is if you're just a little bit better on third down, if you're just a little bit better in the red zone, if you can just make one or two more impact plays a game with your defense, it makes all the difference in the world. And I think when you get those two guys, I think the running game is going to be really good. And I thought it was interesting. I don't know if you saw this, but basically from Sean Callahan, they told AJ Allen he was going to be the number 4 running back, so he bounced. He didn't want to hear that. So And that was the same with Stephon Wynn. He wasn't going to get a ton of playing time this year, so he said deuces, and that's fine. Those guys deserve those opportunities, but I think that it also does show that Nebraska's got talent here in the room, and while I do wish that things might have worked out with AJ Allen, if you're not willing to compete, and earn your spot, then go somewhere else, man.
I don't know, fourth string running back, I'd probably say see you later too. But
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 like
any
it's
yeah.
like at the same time though, man, it's like he could have stuck around and he could have still, you know what I mean? It's just I get it, but
I mean, if you really think about it, and I hate to say this, but this is true. Gabe Irvin might get hurt again.
oh yeah.
People might get hurt again. So, although I do
Well,
think
and it's not like he wasn't going to get the ball, It's not like AJ Allen was going to ride the pine all year.
I mean, Brian Applewhite recruited him here, so he had no previous connection to the staff either. So
Yeah.
I get that too as well. But and quite honestly, where would you rather play? Miami, where there's hot girls and the U everywhere and beaches, or Nebraska? Like you got to think about it from a personal standpoint as well. Miami has a very very good NIL setup that
Yeah.
Nebraska doesn't have yet either. So I'm sure there were a bunch of factors, but no, I think
I don't
it's
know, man. They got the Hurricanes down there. It's hot as hell. I'd prefer Nebraska, but that's just me.
uh I mean, talk to me in the winter and then we'll talk about if you'd rather prefer Nebraska over Miami. I'd rather Miami in a second in terms of just weather, but anyway. Um they are also recruiting Bishop Gorman running back Micah Capana, who's coming as part of the official visitor weekend on beginning on June 23rd. So I mean, they are looking for running backs, and I honestly don't think running back will be a hard position to recruit with EJ Barthel running the show there, and of course the other assistant coaches helping.
Yeah, they got some interesting guys, coming up there. There's a couple official visitors. I think they'll be taking probably 2 or 3 running backs in this class. I know they're holding out hope for Nathaniel Frazier, but like him and Brandon Baker and those guys, like they don't. I really don't think that those are going to happen. I mean,
No.
maybe if Nebraska like has a 9-3 season and they get them for a game, and but right now, based on just them taking spring visits, if they don't come back this summer, I think I just think that that's too long, without getting him on campus. I mean, things can change obviously, and if Nebraska has like a crazy season, and builds a bunch of momentum, maybe, but it's like you're against Brandon Baker and Nathaniel Frazier, even the other kid, Breland or whatever his name is. You're recruiting against like USC, Alabama, Georgia, Michigan. I mean, everybody. So it's just going to be really hard for Nebraska to win. With Raiola, it's going to be hard to win those recruitments until you actually have like a winning season.
And quite honestly, they did a good job of recruiting back in December and finishing out the 2023
Yeah.
class. So, you know,
And to be fair, I'll say this: I think that yeah, I've questioned just a couple of their strategic moves a little bit, with the Raiola thing, and the Teddy Rizak thing's not that big of a deal, but you're not going to get every evaluation right. But the staff has recruited well. I mean, let's not act like they're not doing a good job. It's just when you're recruiting, you have to look at what they're recruiting to right now. They don't have the NFL pedigree to sell at Nebraska. They don't have
right.
the winning season, so it's just they've got to build that up. And you know that's what Matt Rule said. The kids that matter to me are the ones that commit to us without that evidence and stuff. But you're not gonna, the 5 stars aren't gonna do that. So I feel like Nebraska and Rule and everybody they've done about as well as they can with the hand they've been dealt for right now in recruiting.
They're in a much better spot than I think the program was last year too.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, but I think even on the special teams, landing Tristan Alvano, a very talented kicker. I mean, they've managed to get some really good players. It's more just about putting the product on the field now, and it's something where we've been eagerly awaiting for the past, quite frankly, 9 months or so. And once we start winning games and once everybody sees what this program is going to be like, then I think it will be easier to recruit. Because, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, I agree with you. And that's why I think it's smart to, with like Nathaniel Frazier, try to get him back for a game, because then maybe, if you're winning, you start off 2 or 3-0 or whatever, and then he goes to Lincoln Memorial Stadium and it's rocking, then maybe you got a shot. You know what I mean? So I do think it's smart the way that they're trying to get those guys back for those visits. I do wish they could get them over the summer too, but it is what it is. But I still think that they're doing a good job of selling Nebraska. And once they have those results, the recruiting results are gonna they'll be there eventually.
I mean, the fact that we were able to, flip Cam Lenhart and get Princewill Uwamalian and even Ethan Nation, I mean, those are three big recruiting wins right there. I mean, I think Princewill is going to go to the NFL. I would say probably the same thing about Lenhart too. I think he's a little bit less skilled than Princewill, but that's not a knock on him. I think Princewill is going to be really good. So, I mean, I'll be excited to see how that group comes together as well because they did really, really well during the spring game.
Yeah, Leonard's interesting to me because I think teams just I don't understand the lack of kind of recruiting interest after he decommitted from Nebraska. Penn State was on him a little bit. Michigan State, there was another, I think Mississippi or somebody, I can't remember. But yeah, I think it's just because he's a tweener. He's like 6'3", 2. So I don't know if teams know to make him a more of a traditional end or a edge, but I'm like, I don't care where he plays as long as he can rush the quarterback. I don't care if his hand's in the ground, if he's in the dirt, if he's a 5 technique, if he's a, you know what I mean? Just let the guy go, rush the, like too many teams, I think, try to pigeonhole guys into one position or another. Like, can the guy beat an offensive tackle and sack the quarterback? I don't care what he plays. You know what I mean? That's why I feel like Tony White understands that. I really feel like he gets that, and how to move guys around and kind of making almost a positionless kind of defense in the front seven. That's what I feel like you really, I mean, you see like in the NFL sometimes, you'll have like one or two defensive linemen. That's it. And everybody else will be pass rushers or, you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like you need that NFL mind, and he's going to finally bring that to Nebraska. And that has me pretty excited.
Yeah, one of the, like I always refer back to one of my favorite players that I've watched in Luke Kuechly. I mean, he could rush the passer, he could drop back in coverage. He was kind of a do-it-all player. And I think the 3-3-5 allows players to be positionless. I think it allows to mix and match, and that's why I think, a guy like MJ Sherman or a guy like Malcolm Hartzog or Uma Million or Leonard could
Chief
really
Borders.
Chief Borders, yeah, that was the name I was thinking of. Chief Borders. I think those guys can really be an asset to this defense, and I'm excited to see how it plays out because Sherman's talked highly of this defense. Borders has talked highly of this defense, so it's good to see that players are buying in and seeing the possibilities with this defense because at least from the TV, I think me and you could see the possibilities of this defense as well.
Yeah, and we don't even get to see Ty Robinson, who's I think our
Yep.
best defensive lineman right now. And I'm also going to be interested to see how Tony White uses him, because he's kind of been moved around a little bit during his Nebraska career. Last year, he definitely was his best season, I
Yeah.
think, and being more of an interior type player. But yeah, I really am excited to see what Ty Robinson can do this year. And I have been keep hoping that Nebraska would look at, another edge rusher in the transfer portal, but I don't know if they're probably at the scholarship limit or, whatever. Maybe they just don't see anybody out there that's a great fit, I guess is what it seems like to Matt from what Matt Rule has said.
I mean, I think honestly, what we see now is pretty much what we're gonna get. Um,
Hmm.
but it's interesting you mentioned Ty Robinson because I think Ty Robinson was brought in here to be a pure pass rusher, and he can rush the passer, but I think he's a better defensive tackle.
Hmm.
And so, it'll be interesting to see, like you said, how they fit him in the defense. I mean, he did have his moments last season. I mean, I hate to be this guy, but getting juked out by Aiden O'Connell was not one of his finer hours. But I mean, overall, he played well. And quite honestly,
I
that was a
forgot about that play.
that was a 43-39 game, and both teams were exhausted. And I
Yeah.
mean, we should have won that game. But anyway, I mean, I think Robinson when put in the right situation, and I think this is another example of Scott Frost not knowing how to utilize players. I
Yeah.
think Robinson fit much better as a defensive tackle, and he's a good space eater. He can, not even rush the passer, but close the pocket in quickly, and
Yeah.
sometimes that's just enough to make a quarterback, kind of uncomfortable and throw the quarterback off.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how much they use like kind of a 2D lineman, and then either like kind of like a 4-5 where you've got like two edges, two
Yep.
inside back. I'm one because that seems like a lot of teams utilize that type of format now, and whether those guys on the outside or have their hand in the dirt or standing up, it really doesn't matter. But I think you'll see a lot with like Ty Robinson at that 3 technique and Elijah Judy, and just having those guys playing more of a traditional kind of defensive tackle role. So I do think that that's going to fit Ty Robinson's game quite a bit. And yeah, I'm really high on the defense. I do not that I'll say I'm bullish on the offensive line. I just think adding, if Teddy's healthy and they've added, basically two other starters, so you get essentially three new starters from last year. So I do think that there's reason to think it will be better, especially like if Bryce Benhart and some of those guys can improve a little bit under this new staff. So at any rate, we've still got almost 100. Well, let's see. Yesterday, I think was 100 days to week zero, the start of week zero. So we got like 104 or 5 days before we play that because we're playing the first Thursday night game, right, against
We
Minnesota.
are,
So
which
we
you'll
got
be
like,
available for, I think. You said
yeah,
maybe.
should be hopefully.
So, I
So I
mean,
mean,
Matt Rule called. He said he saw NFL potential in Bryce Benhart. So either he's smoking some really good weed and having a good time, or he actually sees it. I'm hoping he actually sees it, because if not, then I want his weed dealer.
I think Benner does look like an NFL player. So, but we'll see. I haven't seen it on the field, but he looked good in the spring game. I'll say that I watched him pretty closely, and I thought he looked better, at least
Yeah,
moved
no, he
better.
did.
And I don't know if it just had. I think it had to do maybe with the knee brace thing a little tiny bit, but I do think that coaching wise, things improved this year. So we'll see if it translates over. But health is a big factor with the offensive line too. I mean, that killed us last year, so got to keep those guys healthy.
Now, was Benhart blocking the line that featured Umamelian and Lenhart? I can't remember.
I think so, yeah, but because I'm pretty sure they had them set up like ones versus ones.
Because I was gonna say that wasn't necessarily fair to that offensive line, because that defensive line just ate that group up, and I don't think it was entirely the offensive line's fault, if you know what I mean. I think that's just two really good skilled players defensively that kind of made the rest of the offensive line look bad. But I thought they held their own. I really did. Um,
Yeah, and I think Corcoran was playing left tackle, which he's probably not going to be there if everything works out health wise during the regular season. He'll be at guard or whatever, left guard.
for what it's worth, they also have New Willie back this year, I believe, as well. So
Yeah,
that's more
that's
depth.
a big addition for sure.
Yeah, there's
Yep.
more depth there, and
Because
um,
I'm expecting him to start. I mean, he's a guy that I think could be. I think he could get drafted. I think Ben Scott could get drafted, and I
yep,
do think Bryce Banner could. I mean, the dude's what 6'8" or whatever. I mean,
yeah.
six. I mean, he's got an NFL body. He just needs to put some NFL film out there.
He was here for the Greg Austin era for one season, wasn't he?
Yeah. Yep. He
So he's
was.
been through two offensive line coaches too, and that's the other thing too. Is like this entire line has not had consistency for quite a while, and I do think with this offense, yes, sometimes they need to be better in pass blocking, but they did a good job run blocking last year, and um, they're going to run a lot, I think, this year from all the indications from Marcus Satterfeld. So, I mean, I think it's going to be a little bit easier, and I think you can speak from this perspective as a lineman. Is it a little bit easier to run block than it is to pass block?
Definitely, yeah, definitely is easier. I think because I mean, I don't know how much it's not necessarily easier. You like it more, and you get momentum when you run the football, and you start to establish your physical will a little bit. Whereas when you're pass blocking, you're not really having that physical toll. I mean, it is a little bit easier to step up there and pass block, but also, I mean, if you don't have, I'll say this: if you don't have the premier athletes, it's easier to block like a premier guy. Like for me, when I played people that were better than me, it was obviously easier for me to kind of run block them than pass block them. You know what I mean? So like, that's kind of what's going to happen on if Bryce Benhart gets beat on a running play, like there might be you might lose a yard or something,
Yeah.
but you get beat on a pass block, your quarterback might get hurt for the season and you fumble or something. So
Yep.
I feel like there's just more, not that it's easier, but there was just more kind of disastrous consequences can happen on pass plays where you're not going to see that on, if you're handing the ball off, every play as much.
And we didn't really run too many times last season either, or we started to run and get momentum, and then we just went back to passing. So that
Yeah,
probably
just
didn't
weren't
help things either.
consistent.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark
No,
Whipple.
yeah, I mean they would run the ball well, and then they, like the Illinois game, Minnesota.
Yeah,
I
I
mean, there
remember
were
that.
so many
Minnesota, Illinois.
games,
Yeah.
yeah, and then they just couldn't do, So, and then part of that happened because the quarterback play was so poor that they kind of, loaded up the box. So it is what it is. You need to have both. You got to be able to run and throw because when you're trying to run against an 8-9 man box, it's tough. It really is.
Yeah. No, it is, and hopefully things will change this year, and I expect to see a more physical brand of football, especially with the additions of the fullbacks on the roster now.
I definitely think we're going to see, more physical football, more a brand of football that,
Big
we can
Ten
all be
football.
proud of. Yeah, Big Ten football. And that's what we need to see. And I do think that we're going to see that. A lot of running plays this year. I think Nebraska is going to run the ball maybe 500 times this year. And I think we're going to play really good defense. And I think Jeff Sims, as long as he can stay healthy, I think he's going to, be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten West. So we'll see. I mean, I have a lot of optimism, but there's a lot of question marks too. We just don't know. We just don't know until we see this team out on the field. But to get you through these next 100 days, make sure that you guys hit the subscribe button, get into the comment section. Let us know what you think about Dylan Raiola, or, if Nebraska messed up there, or if you think we're morons or whatever, let us know your comments, and hit the like button. Make sure you hit subscribe and check out HuskerBigRed.com. We're constantly updating with recruiting stuff, basketball, pretty much everything going on with the Cornhuskers. So as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.